Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone. It is the Wednesday, March 25th, 2026 episode of the Marco Dre Show. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to hear today's groundbreaking news right here in America and across the board, where the facts are facts and hard truths thrive. Let's begin the best hour of radio, informative, uncensored, unapologetic, and ready to go. Folks, we're halfway through our week, and all is not quiet on the Western Front, not by a long shot. I want to begin today's broadcast with an article out of the New York Post. Let's not waste any time. We've got so much to go over today, lots of important information to get out. This article is very troubling to me, and I think it's very damning to Donald Trump, where people inside the Trump administration, as you'll come to see, those that are closest to a lot of these actors that have this privy information are getting very, very wealthy off a lot of these bets that you will see that are taking place right now. Let's go over this article right now quickly. Over $500 million in oil bets were placed just 15 minutes before President Trump announced on Monday morning that he was going to begin pausing plans to attack Iranian infrastructure. This is critical energy infrastructure. This is nuclear power plants, facilities, things of that nature. Now, hearing that, investors obviously would send the price of oil down. Because again, if you're going to be taking out Iranian infrastructure for this, Iran's going to respond in kind. You're going to see the same thing take place in Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, UAE, all these places. And then what is that going to do to the market? It's going to completely shut everything down. I mean, it will tank very, very quickly for these global economies, of course, but also for the 20% of the oil that comes out of the region. It's no longer there. That would send the price of oil up. But instead, Trump came in and said, we're not going to be doing this. So what had happened? Obviously, it's going to send the prices downward. Again, rhetoric counts. Never forget that. Even if it's a bunch of nonsense. Now, in this narrow window between 6:49 a.m., 6:50 a.m., again, a minute time frame, there were 6,200 Brent crude and West Texas Intermediate crude futures traded, put in place, a burst of activity valued at about $580 million. This is according to the Financial Times now. I want you to think about that for a second. How much money that actually is. Now, do I think it's 6,200 different people? I do not. But you have a lot of people getting in on this activity. A lot of money being placed in on this. Now, around the same time, we saw volumes in the S&P 500 futures also spiking, with equity markets beginning to move higher just moments later. So, what happens at 7:04 a.m.? 15 minutes or so after the bets were placed. President Trump posts on Truth Social that the U.S. had engaged in productive conversations with Iran. Again, those are completely unfounded, right? Even to this day, they are. And signaled a pause in the planned strikes. Remember, he gave him the 5-day ultimatum saying he wasn't going to be doing this after all. And again, a message that caught the markets completely off guard. Everyone's thinking, hey, we're going to be getting more escalatory in this war, but the opposite was being said right now, even if it wasn't true. So, oil prices quickly plunged. We saw crude falling more than 10% that day, while stock futures surged as investors dialed back any expectations of a prolonged conflict. So they're hearing the opposite. They're hearing, oh, we're not going to bomb these facilities. We're not going to bomb this infrastructure. We're in conversation now. The war is almost over. We practically won it. So these investors are saying, oh, this is good. Finally, this is over. It really was temporary. See, we'll get this oil back in supply a couple of weeks from now. Everything will return to normal. Everything is going to be great. Except for the fact that none of this is probably true. Certainly not the war ending. It's just going to be prolonged a little bit longer now. That's the way I see it. Now, it was not known exactly how the trades were positioned, though the flurry of activity suggests that the bets were on the falling oil prices. And probably these people made a hell of a lot of money on these million-dollar investments. Just thought I'd tell you that. But in that case, whoever placed these wagers would have been poised to reap a handsome profit. Absolutely. Absolutely, they did. And they know exactly what they're doing. By the way, I want to share some information with you right now. Donald Trump Jr., President Trump's son, sits on the board of Polymarket, right? This is an app, if you will, used for political trading. So you make bets on who's going to win the next, the 2026 midterms. It's going to be Republicans or going to be Democrats. Place your bets here, all right? You put your money in and whoever wins, just like betting. That's all it really is. But, we come in, we hear about this 5-day ultimatum ending this Friday and just in time to invade on the weekend. So you come in, you make some money on Monday, you go back to war on Saturday. Isn't it nice? Isn't that great? Then we get later that Monday, though, Iran's paramilitary speaker pushing back, denying that any negotiations even taken place, triggering yet another bout of volatility across the global markets now. So later in the day, they come in and say, no. We never made these conversations. We never had this discussion. We never agreed to anything. They haven't even talked to you. So it remains unclear whether the trades were placed by a single entity or multi-players. I think it was the latter, to be honest with you. But there's no evidence suggesting that the trades were involved from insider information. Of course it was. Again, you could look at the chart. It's laid out here in this article in the New York Post. It shows you this huge blip right at that time I just gave you. And all of a sudden it just dies right out. And then, of course, the tweet is made, and then you see what happens with the oil futures that would take place later that day. Then later in the afternoon, the Iranians come in and say, we never even had these conversations. Now, whether Trump's going to do this or not is, doesn't matter. But this is showing, again, time after time, people close to Trump are privy to this information. They understand this. They knew this was going to happen. A White House spokesperson told the Financial Times that any suggestion that officials profited from insider knowledge was baseless and irresponsible. Well, again, isn't it interesting, though, folks, that Trump's son sits on the board of Polymarket? By the way, I want to share this information with you, too, that I found out. This is according to CNBC. Yahoo Finance reported that Donald Trump Jr., back in 2025, way long ago, put double-digit millions into Polymarket and 1789 Capital. Again, these are trading. You put bets on, you trade on them, you see how this works out. So it's not unheard of that Trump is making a lot of money off these bets. This is how they're doing this. So we see President Trump's wealth since taking office has risen anywhere between $1.4 billion and $3.4 billion. Again, by utilizing various crypto ventures, hospitality revenues, foreign licensing, settlements. Isn't he suing the Wall Street Journal and News Corporation? That'd be Rupert Murdoch, the IRS, and the New York Times and CBS, all for, I think, $10 billion each. It's a lot of money, folks. And by the way, he's also going to get money from tech media deals in place as well. So there's a lot of money to be had with this. But if your son's running Polymarket and you're making all these, again, baseless claims that are going to affect the markets, it's not unheard of, and again, we can't prove this, but it's not unheard of that people are going to be making a lot of money on this. Now, who else would have that privy knowledge 15 minutes before you were going to say this and be dead right about it? So they probably made money on the oil dropping and then again on the oil increasing short thereafter. That's what it comes down to. And that's what it is. Again, this is no better than what Congress does with insider trading, which President Trump was against, allegedly. He wanted to end that. Well, shouldn't the same thing be done with these Polymarkets, these 1789 Capital ventures that you can place these bets on? So we've got to be aware of this. If the president is making decisions, telling people about it, and people close to him are making money on this. Folks, this is no different than what Joe Biden sent his stupid son to do. Taking money from Russia, taking money from China, Ukraine, all these different people. Except that there he was trading his political clout, not just trading on the stock market. So this is very troubling, folks, as you well could imagine. Still, the timing of the trade, just minutes before the market, all this is very odd to see on Wall Street. But I want to bring this to your attention so we all understand what is happening here. I think it's a little bit too coincidental, folks. There are no coincidences in this case. You don't get that lucky at 6:50 in the morning, and then the president saying exactly what you're betting on just 15 minutes later. It just doesn't work out that way. No one's that lucky. Maybe Nancy Pelosi. Who knows? But I don't think the average American is going to be that lucky doing these types of things. And again, the money speaks for itself. Look at the money he's made this first year in an office. Lots of money as a result of all this. All right, folks, let's move on to the war itself. Again, very interesting information coming out right now. We've got to stay privy to it all, as you can imagine. This out of the ZeroHedge right now. It says here that the Bashir nuclear power plant was attacked again on Tuesday night. So I guess we are going to be attacking their infrastructure as well. Luckily, the people made money on Monday prior to this. So it looks like another dangerous escalation took place as Iran's Bashir nuclear power plant was hit, coming just under attack, is what the Iran's state media has stated, citing that the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran confirmed that a projectile struck the facility on Tuesday evening, local time, denouncing it as an act of terrorism against the Islamic Republic's civilian infrastructure. Now, we can't determine exactly who did this. It wouldn't make any sense for Iran to do this, would it? They're already engaged in the war. They've already committed to the war. Now, it could be Israel, who has kind of blown off what President Trump has said. We don't know for sure. But we know that a prior attack on the plant occurred on March 5th, for example, raising significant concerns over issues like potential nuclear and radiation issues occurring from this. And we also know that Iran has also reportedly struck and targeted the Dimona nuclear facility in southern Israel, where they do a lot of their nuclear development for their nuclear weapons that they claim not to have. So, knowing all that, it makes sense that there's some retaliation of this. It wouldn't be unheard of if this were to take place. But this is what's happening. We're escalating to destroying energy infrastructure that is not going to be built overnight, that is going to take a very long time to rebuild, and it will have devastating effects on the civilian populations of both countries, by the way. And by the way, the Gulf Arab states as well. You can't strike an energy plant or a refinery or what have you, and then have it up and running just days later. Even if nothing were to hit these plants, to get them to be up and running would take weeks afterwards, after this conflict is over, after this war ends. Now, Iran is coming out and issued now 5 conditions for ending the war. They laid it out very clearly on Press TV. Here's what they are. It says a complete halt to aggression and assassination by the enemy. They're, of course, referring to the United States and Israel and any of their cohorts in the region. The establishment of concrete mechanisms to ensure that the war is not pre-imposed on the Islamic Republic. So, we've got guaranteed and clearly defined payment of war damages and reparations. I think good luck with that. The conclusion of the war across all fronts and for all resistant groups involved throughout the region, and international recognition and guarantees regarding Iran's sovereign right to exercise authority over the Strait of Hormuz. So, we might get number 1, folks. Maybe we get this. Maybe we get a halt to this conflict. I don't think any of the other 4 points are going to be honored in any such way. The establishment of concrete mechanisms to ensure that the war is not reimposed. So they're talking about any type of aggression again towards the Iranian government by the United States and Israel. That's what it comes down to. I don't see any type of mutually security cooperation between the United States and Iran after this. I really don't. That would be a surrender, folks. Don't you see this? Trump is not going to do that. Guaranteed and clearly defined payment of war reparations? No way. Not a chance. Look how much money we already have to spend if we even get the opportunity to rebuild our bases, our air structures in the region. It's not going to be, it's over $100 billion for just that. Think of the radar systems that were destroyed by Iran, totaling billions of dollars, just that alone. So if we're going to rebuild in the Middle East, again, unless those Gulf Arab states either collapse or they say, get out, the amount of money we're going to be spending just to rebuild those is going to be well over $100 billion. Easily $100 billion. And I don't think the United States is going to be forking over any money to the Iranians. I just don't see it happening. Look at this. The conclusion of the war across all fronts and for all resistant groups. Yep. So I think they're talking about the Gulf Arab states that have been facilitating the United States and Israel throughout this process. Do we break alliance with them? Do they break alliance with us? Is the Middle East going to be reshaped in some way? Will these states even exist after this whole conflict? Will the same family monarchs that are in control of these countries even have a say in this? Will they be thrown out of these countries? You know, it's interesting to understand, too, like countries like the UAE, Qatar, the majority of people that live in these countries are not people that are Qataris, for example. They're not of the United Arab Emirates, for example. These are people that live either from the United States or Europe or someplace else that have lots of money that live in these countries, and that's what makes the money flow so well. So I don't know if the people there would rise up that are actually of that area and say, get these people out of here. We don't want these people here anymore. We don't want the United States presence here anymore. We don't want you in Bahrain. We don't want any of it. Now, we don't know if this is going to happen, but if these people, for example, these wealthy monarchs were to flee, for example, and the governments fall, what would that look like for the region? Where would they go? Would they go to Europe? Would they go to the United States? Would they go someplace else? Nobody knows. But it looks like a lot of these governments could be teetering on the brink of collapse themselves, at least for their power. I don't think the people in these countries are going to say, yes, come back in. I just don't see that happening. As for the recognition of controlling the Strait of Hormuz, again, I don't know what they would do with that. If they would say, you now owe us money every time you cross. If they do something like, for example, nationalizing the strait, like, for example, what Egypt does in the Suez Canal, offering tolls and what have you for anything that passes through. I don't know what they would do. But again, that would be economically sound for them. They would make a hell of a lot of money off that. Lots and lots of things go through that strait. And for them to control that, to allow access to that, if they were to nationalize it, that would be a very big benefit to them and not for, of course, the United States and their allies. It's very interesting moving forward with this, I have to tell you. Now, the United States retorted with a 15-point plan given to the Iranians that was delivered to them by the Pakistani government. Again, the Pakistanis are trying to end this conflict. But they were just obviously rejected by the Iranians. The officials there said that it was a list of impossible wishes. I see the Iranians right now as coming in and saying it will end on our terms. So if they don't get what they want from the United States, like those 5 points, or conditions, if you will, I see this war continuing on. And I don't see it as a win to the Israelis by any stretch of the imagination. I don't know what's going to happen in Israel, too, by the way. Are people actually going to stay in that country where they've been hit with barrages of cluster munitions night after night? 8, 9 waves of this nonsense? Living in these shelters, these bunkers underground? What type of security is that for the Israeli people? And we know that the Israeli people, by and large, want this conflict. But still, no, we're talking about innocent people here. Is this a country you want to raise your children in? Is this a country you want to stay in? What ensures your safety when you're dealing with this day after day after day? So I think we're going to see lots of people leaving this area. I have to tell you, I think a lot of people are going to be leaving the Middle East after this. And with the war, too, in southern Lebanon right now that's taking place, what's taking place in Gaza right now. I fear, too, that the Houthis will come in very, very soon. I see that as happening very quickly. I think that what they would do is they will shut down the Red Sea. and they won't allow any access into that region. And I think they will fire upon anybody that comes through it. That's the way I see that taking place right now. So we can expect Iran to reject the U.S. ceasefire draft deal again. They're calling it illogical already. So I don't think that's going to play out at all. That's the way I see it. Now, Bloomberg News has summarized things as where they stand. It says here that Iran has now kept up missile and drone attacks on Israel and the Gulf Arab states as of right now, even after the United States floated a plan to end the war that's wreaked havoc across the entirety of the Middle East, and especially inside of these global markets. Again, we're talking about the Asian markets collapsing. We're talking about Europe now going into recession with their economies. Things are changing, and they're changing very quickly. But the Iranians are smart. They understand what's going on here. And they've now said that they've been tricked twice by President Trump, which I don't know how you could have been tricked the second time. I think this should have been well common knowledge. When you have a fleet amassing all around your country, I don't think those ships are just sitting there as a bluff. I think they're going to be doing something. And of course they did. That's why I told you the war is going to happen. But they've said they don't want to be fooled again. And I don't think they will be moving forward after this. I don't think they're going to buy any type of agreement that is posted to Truth Social or handed to them by somebody else. I think they were going to want something that is, again, ratified by Congress in terms of a treaty that is going to ensure their safety as a nation, their sovereignty as a peoples, that they will not be attacked again, that their allies in the region are not going to be attacked again by Israel. Think Lebanon, think of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, think of the Palestinians in the West Bank. I think this all will be a faction if there's any type of peace moving forward between these two groups of people. So, again, this is, moving in the direction I thought it would. You have on the ground, Iran is now tightening up their control over the Strait of Hormuz. By the way, we talk about the Strait of Hormuz being closed, but it's really not being closed right now. The only thing they're demanding is that detailed ship data in, for example, cases for fees for passage, especially for oil and gas tankers right now. Yes, the traffic is thin with any type of non-compliant vessels that are being turned away. But the rising pressure on the Asian economies, like India, for example, drawing a pushback from China. We're seeing only people paying in the Chinese yuan now to get this oil or what have you through the Strait of Hormuz. We see hundreds of vessels in this region, folks, still paralyzed after Iran adopted the eye for an eye policy to reestablish any type of deterrence and impose the sever costs of both the American Gulf partners and the global economy as well. So you have ships that have been sitting there for well over 3 weeks now. They can't get their goods and products through the region right now. So the Iranians are really pushing and bolstering up BRICS in this area. Because now they're saying, unless you trade in our currency, you can't trade in the petrodollar anymore. These goods are not coming through the region. They're just simply not going to do that. That is a major blow, not only to the U.S. economy, but also to the U.S. dollar as well. And that is a big push in terms of what BRICS can do right now as well. So things are changing. They're changing quickly. And I don't see them holding up on this. I can't see them backing down. It's just not going to happen. They will enforce this moving forward. So that's happening. And now we've got to talk about the other issue now. Of course, we're talking about the monitoring of U.S. troops in the region. I think Tehran will obviously be looking into that. Will they try to take Kark Island? What is the ploy with taking Kark Island? I have no idea. It's so far in the Persian Gulf, I don't see that as deterring anything in terms of moving through the Strait of Hormuz. I don't know if that's to take over part of their energy infrastructure, because obviously oil tankers move up to Kark Island, and obviously they can refill these oil tankers and they move on. They hold roughly, I think, about 18 million barrels of oil in it at any given time. I think it holds up to about 30. But even then, you have other energy outsources throughout the Persian Gulf for the Iranians as well. So I don't even see why we would do this. But this is what the U.S. is looking to as the next step. U.S. troops on the ground, which I think will be devastating for our Marines or any sailors that are put in these locations. I don't see this as being beneficial. I don't see it as taking over their the ground inside of Iran, which again would take well over 3 to 4 million of our own troops. We're not getting any other support from Europe or Israel for that matter. So it would have to be our own troops, which we do not have. You cannot take over a 1,000,000-man army with 5,000 troops on Kark Island. It's just simply not going to do anything beneficial. And we also run the risk if we do put these troops there, how do we resupply them? How do we get goods to them? How do we get medical care to them? Should they need it? We have no idea how we're going to be doing this. Do we airdrop them in? How do we get in this region? Do we risk putting our Air Force in the skies and potentially risk them getting struck down? All these things are a factor. And then you have to also consider, if we take over Kark Island, if we take over, let's say, 18 million barrels of oil, do now the Gulf Arab states also risk their energy infrastructure being hit? That's the next question you have to ask yourself, which I think would be very likely, to be honest with you. And then we come to the next point. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are now thinking and considering about joining the U.S. and Israel in the war against Iran. This would be ridiculous for so many different reasons. Yes, they're two key American allies in the Persian Gulf. What would they offer? That's what I'm going to ask you. What would the UAE offer the United States that they can't already provide? Or Saudi Arabia, for that matter? Now, according to a report published by the Wall Street Journal on Monday, said there that Saudi Arabia and the UAE have now taken steps in recent days that shift a significant stance from their earlier positions to maintain a low profile in this conflict. Okay. What are they going to do, though? Neither country has offered officially or committed military action. Both appear to be edging towards deeper participation. But what would they actually do? We see Saudi Arabia has agreed to let the American forces operate out of King Fayed Air Base. Okay, fine, whatever. They've already been doing this in the region. That's why the Saudis have been hit. That's why they're hitting these installations through the region, because they're ours. That's why they're doing this. They're not attacking civilian infrastructure, at least not yet. But this is a reversal from a previous stance. I don't know if that would escalate tensions between the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and of course Iran. I think it probably would. But a reversal from its previous stance that it would not permit this territory or airspace to be used to attack Iran. Now they're saying, yes, go do it. So what does this mean now? This shift comes after a series of Iranian strikes, already against Saudi energy infrastructure as well as attacks on the capital, Riyadh. So now we've got to ask ourselves, what is the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman thinking now? Is he going to put ground troops inside of Iran? Is he going to help out in that effect on the offensive? I don't think so. I really don't see this as being beneficial to either of these countries. But they know that they're in trouble. They know that their leadership is in trouble right now. How are they going to sell this to their people right now? That their energy infrastructure, which again is their number one go-to for GDP, is now off the table. And if the Houthis really decide to shut down the Red Sea, they're in very big trouble. How are they going to get any of their oil to market? They're not going to. Because right now what they're doing is they're pushing everything out to the western part of the country to utilize the Red Sea and, of course, put the ships to the sea that way and, of course, move it on out. But if the Yemenis actually shut it down and say, no, nobody's moving now. Now we're shutting you down. Now this is detrimental to everything that Saudi Arabia could even do. Because, they could move the oil through pipelines throughout the country. I'm not saying they can, but if everything's stuck in the port, it doesn't matter where it goes. Everything's in standstill. So now we have Saudi Foreign Minister Faisal bin Farhan warning that the Saudi Arabians' patience with the Iranian attacks is not unlimited. I just don't see this as being beneficial to either of these governments. I don't see it even being beneficial to the U.S. and Israel in this case. I really don't see that. It says there separately, the UAE has begun taking more aggressive measures, including shutting down Iranian-linked institutions inside of Dubai and considering broader financial restrictions targeting Iranian assets. Okay. Okay, well, again, I don't think the Iranians care at this point. I got to be honest with you. I don't think they care about any of this. What they see this as is a fight for their own survival. This is what they are working on. They know if they let down, if they allow this takeover to happen, or if they let a ground invasion take over the country, they're done. They're done as a nation. It's over for them. Maybe a puppet government comes in and is installed, like we see in Syria, if you will. But it's over for them. It's over. And it's not going to get any better for them moving forward at all. So we've got all these reports coming through about what's taking place. Obviously, the Strait of Hormuz being shut down is a big benefactor to them. And it's further alienated these Gulf Arab states. And I think they're really pushing the United States to, okay, if we give you a little bit, will you finally take them out so we can get our economies moving again? I think that's the step that they're coming with right now. We also have Arab officials now saying that the 6 countries of the Gulf Cooperation Council are now urging Washington to decisively weaken the Iranian military capabilities before ending the conflict, fearing that a premature ceasefire could leave them all exposed. Again, you're not going to get a ceasefire from Iran. It's not going to happen. It could be proposed, but it's not going to happen. The Iranians know exactly what a ceasefire means between the United States and Israel. Hell, they were in talks, and we struck them twice. What good would a ceasefire do? A pause? So what, they can replenish their munitions? It's not going to be anything that they're going to agree to. They will continue this war until they get on paper from the United States, and possibly even Israel, ratified that they're not going to be attacking them again. That's what they're looking for right now. So we can expect that. Expect the war to continue and expect the United States to try to put these boots on the ground. And again, we can expect the attacks on their energy infrastructure as well. That's going to be the next steps in this conflict. Let's move over to Europe right now. We haven't talked about what's taking place in Russia as of late. We've been hyper-focused on what's taking place in Iran because, of course, it affects our economy. But look at this. It says here in the AP News that a major Russian drone strike and missile attack on civilian areas of Ukraine have now killed 6 people and injured at least 46, officials said on Tuesday. Moscow's army has now stepped up efforts to break through the Ukrainian front lines, of course, the defense, and what could be the start of an anticipated spring ground offensive. So what's taking place in Russia? Putin is upping the ante now. You see Russia firing almost 400 long-range drones across Ukraine overnight. You have Ukraine Air Forces have stated this now. This is some of the biggest attacks they've seen in weeks. The onslaught is being continued in. Dozens of drone strikes targeting the capital of Kiev during the daytime. I think Putin wants to start to end this conflict. I really do. Russia now launched swarms of Iranian-designed Shahed drones as well, hitting at least 7 different cities. All this is, again, escalating the conflict right now. But they need to take place something big because this has gone on for over 4 years now. You know, they can launch 23 cruise missiles, 7 ballistic missiles into Ukraine. If they take Kiev, this war is over. It's over. So they can hit 10 locations across the country. They've got to take the capital. They've got to actually maintain control of it. Once they do that, I think this war will be over. So will Putin decide to actually cross over the Dnieper River and try to take Kiev? I think that'd be a step in the right direction for him. Because again, this war is going to end on Russia's terms. It's not going to end on Ukraine's terms. Zelensky is not going to give over his power. It's just the way it's going to go. But how much more can the Ukrainian people suffer? You've already had millions of people leave the country. The amount of people that have been killed, especially the troops, very much outweighs what the Russian casualties are and the Russian deaths. So we've got to talk about what will Russia do next, and it looks like they're ramping things up right now. The war of attrition leads on. But if I were Vladimir Putin, I would consider taking Kiev. I would control it, and I would make them surrender that way. That would be the way I would do this. And I think we're reaching that point very soon. Ukraine is losing out on munitions. They're losing out on money, even though we're still seeing countries like the UK and France come to their aid at times. I think it's over for them, though, moving forward. So I think we're seeing this really start to ramp up now that the weather's getting better. I think you're going to see a lot more of these attacks moving forward. That's the way I see it. All right, so that it will intensify, even though we haven't been paying attention to it. Nonetheless, yesterday we talked about the fraud inside of the United States. We honed in on what's taking place inside of Minnesota. And I told you that other states are very much aligned with this rampant fraud. Well, out of Slay News, Republicans are now talking about on the House Committee on the Oversight and Government Reform, they've now launched an investigation into what they've described as rampant taxpayer fraud inside of California's hospice programs. Not a shock. This is what Nick Shirley was working on just recently. Now, the move escalates scrutiny on how the state manages billions in taxpayer-funded healthcare spending. Obviously, there's lots of money to go around. The lawmakers are now demanding that they get answers from Gavin Newsom, arguing that weak oversight has allowed the fraud to flourish inside the state. Oh, yes. At the expense of taxpayers and, of course, the vulnerable patients that don't get the care of which they need. They sent a letter to Gavin Newsom stating that recent reports have now revealed alarming evidence of fraudulent activity in California's hospice programs, including agencies overbilling Medicaid and fraudulent enrolling beneficiaries without their knowledge. This is what's taking place inside the Golden State right now, folks. This is just one of many programs, too. You'll find out in just a minute. So the lawmakers have made it clear, though, that they're looking at both the financial and the ethical failure to hold people accountable inside their state. So as a result of all this, Americans across the country are now paying for California's hospice fraud. This is what's taking place right now. You and I are paying for this. So I'm glad there's going to be an investigation for this, but why is the DOJ not looking into this? Why has this not been referred to Pam Bondi? Why not? Now, the move is signaling a broader push to spotlight the alleged mismanagement in these democratically run states, absolutely. But we have to understand something. It's not just this one little program. It's all over the state. Let's hone in on this. Why not? Let's look at some other things, right? This is just in California. You got $32 billion in COVID fraud relief. Again, illegally, fraudulently dispersed. You got $24 billion in unaccountable homeless fraud. You can, again, look at Nick Shirley for all of this, by the way. He's done a great job with all this. He was interviewing people on Skid Row recently, again, pushing to the idea that they ask for this money. The money is said to be spent on improving homeless conditions for people, getting them shelter, and what happens as a result of it? Absolutely nothing. You get a higher homeless population inside of California. That's Gavin Newsom for you. We can look at the $18 billion on the high-speed rail. $15 billion of that coming from the federal government. There's not even a line of track laid for this high-speed rail, so-called. That's taking place right now, and again, they're asking for even more money out of Sacramento. It's amazing. Then we can look at the $2.5 billion in food stamp fraud. Look at the SNAP program. Look at all these things. So it's not just one little hospice program. It's a lot of different things. Now, we had a spokesperson for Gavin Newsom pushing back on the allegations, suggesting that, for example, they've taken decisive action in the hospice fraud years ago. Back in 2021, Newsom signed legislation placing a moratorium on these new hospice licenses, for example. Now, a policy that remains in effect today, preventing bad actors from entering the system while strengthening oversight of existing providers. Okay, that's great, but then who's been arrested? Can they tell us anyone that's been arrested right now? Why have people not been arrested? We even had people inside Minnesota getting arrested. Probably not the number of people that need to be. But if this is something you've put into effect just 5 years ago, why has no one been arrested? Why has no one paid the money back to the taxpayer? All this is, again, very troubling. So we have the California Department of Health now facilitating a multi-department and multi-agency hospice fraud task force that includes representation from the California Health and Human Services Agency. Okay. Now, according to the administration's, enforcement actions have already provided results. Well, what did they come up with? This is their results in roughly 5 years. More than 280 hospice licenses have been revoked over the past 2 years, and an additional 300 providers are under investigation. Where is the money, Gavin? Where is it? Who's got the money? Who ripped off the people? Has anyone been accounted for? Has anyone been charged with this fraud? Are they able to get away with this? Only time will tell. But it looks like it hasn't been. So now we're seeing the federal scrutiny intensifying right now. You have investigations leading to the latest clash between the Republicans in the House and, of course, the California leadership over their governance, over their oversight issues, which they allow to run scot-free. That's what we're seeing right now. Now, at the front of it, we go and look back at things like Medicaid, Medicare, for example, which, again, the state relies heavily on. But remember I talked to you yesterday. We talked about the liabilities largely coming out of the intragovernmental programs, for example, coming out of things like Medicare, right? The government needs to pay this money off. We're seeing rampant fraud coming out of this. This is where a lot of this money adds up over time. And again, a lot of times the government has to pay this. Again, they have to pay this through taxation, for example, or simply because they've just printed this money out of thin air. But this is where the rampant fraud comes in, folks. This is what adds to, again, inflation. Why? Because, well, you have to print the money out. You push the money out into circulation, that more dollars for the same thing, or in this case, we're not even getting the services, but you have more dollars out there, that means higher prices. That's what it always leads to. So, Gavin Newsom, again, putting the spotlight on him. The probe should probably really look at the failures of the system, but again, it's going unchecked right now because Gavin Newsom isn't looking at it. He could pull licenses all he wants. If nobody goes down, these people get away with it. They get away with lots of money. So this is the state of California right now. This is the state of the Golden State. And how these taxpayer-funded healthcare programs are really not providing the services they say they are. And, of course, they're ripping the taxpayer off at the end of the day. Everyone should be upset about this. Absolutely, 100%. So, Pam Bondi, this is something you should actually do, get involved with, arrest people, get the money back, get the stolen money back, and actually put it to good use. That would be nice for a change. You know, speaking of California, the Gateway Pundit said that the California gubernatorial debate was canceled now because, get this, only white candidates qualified for the event. Unbelievable. So the USC is not going to be catering to the event, it looks like. There was supposed to be a debate set for tonight for the California gubernatorial race, and now it's been canceled. Because, well, it's just too white, folks. You can't have that. So millions of Americans are saying, so what? Who even cares about this? California has massive problems right now. Look at this fraud. I think that should be a topic discussed. How are they going to handle this moving forward? So is it really the issue that it's just too white? Or is it simply because DEI rules the way? Who knows? Now, perhaps one of the reasons that California is bleeding population for the first time in history now is not just because of the fraud, but of course the high cost of living, the issues of things like fire management, the second worst roads in the country, the crumbling education in the country, the inability to run a business, the high taxation, all these things, the inability to buy a home. You have businesses now leaving the state because of a proposed wealth tax. We want to hear from these people. We want to hear from these candidates, Democrat and Republican alike. Now, I think you're crazy if you're going to vote for a Democrat in California, but this is where we are right now. So do we even get to hear these candidates now? How is this going to work moving forward right now? We're focused on the skin color of the candidate running in the race right now? Is that what it's coming down to? Is that what this is all about? How do you cancel a debate because of criticism over what people look like? I mean, it just doesn't really make any sense. Anyways, let's listen to... I've got a clip in this article I want to play for you. This is... I believe it is, if I'm not mistaken, one of the local television stations. Oh, yes, KABC in Los Angeles. Talking about why this is taking place, folks. Get a load of this right now. Take a listen to clip one.
Yeah, I mean, look, USC has been under fire all week over its decision to exclude these four candidates of color from tonight's debate. That included also, by the way, Vlad, HHS Secretary, former HHS Secretary Javier Becerra and former LA Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa. And remember, Latinos are, the largest ethnic group in California, about 8 to 9 eligible voters. But those four total that were excluded called the criteria rigged and demanded a boycott. USC held firm right up until it didn't. Late last night, less than 24 hours before the debate was set to begin, the university pulled the plug, citing what it called a significant distraction from the issues that matter to voters. And like debate formula USC used did rank candidates on polling and fundraising, something that is customary. But critics pointed out that it let in San Jose Mayor Matt Mahan, a white candidate who polls lower than some of those excluded. USC says the methodology was airtight, but I think some of the optics were hard to survive. But the whole situation shows, Vlad, just in this really large field, about 10 plus candidates, especially on the Democratic side, it could cause some of these unintended effects. And it's difficult to have too many candidates on a debate stage.
So here's the problem. You have, 6 of these candidates remaining? Here's the problem. You've got Steve Hilton, you have Chad Bianco, the two Republicans who are actually leading the entire field right now, which is pretty unique in a so-called blue state. Will throw that out there for you. They're polling at 16 and 14% respectively in one of the latest polls I've seen. Now, the next two people are in a dead heat with each other. That'd be Katie Porter out of Orange County, Tom Steyer. We know he's a billionaire hedge fund manager, I do believe, in the Bay Area. And then you have Eric Swalwell, who doesn't even live in the state of California, but somehow gets on the ticket as of right now. So they're all in a dead heat for 10%. Now, the other candidates I mentioned, Antonio Villaraigosa, former LA mayor, Betty Yee, Tony Thurmond, who's the education secretary, Xavier Becerra, or as Joe Biden called him, Javier Baccaria. They're all polling in these single digits right now. Now, one of the people that he mentions is the San Jose mayor, Matt Mahan, again a Democrat. He's polling extremely low. But as I said to you, it's because of people that are pulling a certain amount of money. There's a lot of money in San Jose that he could probably get behind to get in this race, to qualify to, again, speak at this debate. Why would you totally exclude the top 6 candidates in this? Why would you do that? Why didn't you let the Californian people decide who they want? Because, again, if the person in the race is polling at 1%, 2%, 3%, what chance they have against the people in their party that are polling much, much higher than them? And does that mean that these 4 Democrats or so simply get out of the race? What does that mean for them? Are we simply just not going to have anybody speak? Are we not going to exchange ideas and values at these debates? What is the reason for the canceling of this? How somebody looks? What good does that do? I mean, let's talk about values. Let's talk about problem solving. How do we fix these problems in the state of California? Nobody will answer this. And the left's obsession with DEI, with race, isn't just destroying California, it's destroying the country right now. You've got candidates for governor that should be on stage talking about ideas, how to fix these problems, but they're not doing that. So why would USC cancel this? Californians need to hear these propositions from these candidates so they can select the top 2, which right now it's 2 Republicans. I don't know if it'll stay that way. I doubt it. I think the California Democrats will come out and say, hey, listen, let's get behind one candidate so the Democrats rally behind them so we at least get the top 2 in, because in California, thanks to Arnold Schwarzenegger, you have a jungle primary. That means the top 2 best performing candidates, even if it's 2 Democrats or 2 Republicans, makes the final ticket in the general. Now, do I think it'll be Chad Bianco versus Steve Hilton? I think that'd be fantastic, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think over time, what you're going to see take place, you'll see the lower performing Democrats jump out. They'll get behind one candidate, whoever that may be, if it's an Eric Swalwell or if it's a Katie Porter. I don't see Tom Steyer really pulling one out there. Most people in California don't even know who Tom Steyer is. Of course, most people don't even know who Katie Porter or Eric Swalwell is. But I think you should have people exchange ideas because California has some serious issues. And so goes California, so goes the country. This is woke nonsense to the extreme. The fact that you would cancel a debate. If you have parameters to get into the debate and these candidates aren't meeting it, then they're not meeting it. That's not indicative of who they are. It's just indicative that they're not drawing the proper money or the proper support to qualify to get on that stage. And in a state like California, just drop your standards, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what else to say to you about this. If you have standards and they don't meet it and they don't make it, it's not because California is racist. They're simply not making it because they're simply not pulling the proper funding or the proper support. So why would we need to hear from these 3 or 4 candidates then? Doesn't make any sense. By the way, Xavier Becerra was the Attorney General of the state of California. He was a congressman for quite some time. I think he could pull support if he actually had it from the majority of the state. He won a statewide election. I believe it was twice he won Attorney General, if I'm not mistaken, before he went to work for HHS in the federal government under Joe Biden. So it's ridiculous to point to racism and, all this as being a key factor in this. Let the candidates get up there. Let them debate. I want to hear from everybody so we can break it down and see what the best fit for California moving forward is. God help us if it's Eric Swalwell. I'll just put it to you that way. Oh, by the way, let's go over this article I had for us yesterday. I got about 10 minutes in the broadcast. We got to talk about education. Education is very, very crucial. As you can imagine, this is out of the Federalist. And we talk about inflation in terms of money. Let's talk about K through 12 grade inflation now. This is interesting to me. And is it making American kids dumber? And is it costing them money when they go to earn a living afterwards? I think it is. So we have teachers now in the K through 12 public schools that give kids higher marks than the students actually perform at and what they actually warrant on their report cards. What they found out is that increasingly widespread high school grade inflation can cost students more than $200,000 in earning potential per teacher per year, is what a groundbreaking study has now found. So I want you to think about that. This is what this means. You lose out on $200,000 throughout your earning in your lifetime through a teacher that props you up, gives you a higher grade. Now, why is that, do you think? Well, there's a couple different reasons. Number one, you haven't met the criteria. Therefore, you are getting a grade that you don't qualify for. And as a result of that, you don't have the skills necessary when you enter the next grade. So therefore, you're being told that you have, an A instead of maybe a C or whatever it may be. But then you've got to go back and relearn that information. That's what it comes down to. Again, it's very stupid that this is taking place, but this is the world we live in. We give grades, we pass kids along. What they found out in this rigorous analysis, they went from high school data from Los Angeles and Maryland. Again, LA is a huge, for example, the second largest school district, Los Angeles Unified. And they took this data, this widespread grade inflation isn't harmless, just feel-good pedagogy. It's actually sabotaging the students' futures. Take a look at this. Average high school GPAs have risen nearly half a letter grade over the past 4 decades. Okay, so we're going back into the mid-1980s till present day. Even as the standardized test scores decline, the average grade for these students has risen. So this divergence screams inflation. Teachers are awarding higher grades for the same or lesser performances. And by the way, we know through the standards that they want students to perform by in the classroom has dropped significantly in that time frame as well. So they're demanded much less, and they're performing much lower. And as a result of the standards, kids still get a higher grade, and they have less output afterwards. So the study, a working paper from the National Bureau of Economic Research, distinguishes from 2 forms of leniency. When a teacher inflates the grades across the board, giving higher marks than the student's actual performance warrants, the ripple effect afterwards is far beyond the classroom. So a single teacher who is noticeably more lenient can subtly suppress test scores following the year, slightly lower the chances of the students graduating, and nudge them towards a less rigorous post-secondary paths, particularly two-year colleges. Over a lifetime, though, these small shifts add up in a staggering way. Researchers have now estimated that the cumulative effect of widespread grade inflation can cost students more than $200,000 in lost earning potential per teacher per year, as I said to you earlier. That is a lot of money. There's another one. Narrower form of leniency, pushing marginal students just over the failing line. This passing grade line inflation can help students finish high school, for example, and increase retention rates, especially among those who might as well drop out. But here's the benefits. They're short-lived, and the long-term payoff in career readiness and earning softening remains limited. The study says the easy A's equal less pay, over time, and the long-term effects of grade inflation shows that early, unchecked leniency sets students on a trajectory that favor comfort over mastery, masking gaps in knowledge and ultimately holding them back. Now, I find this, again, very interesting. My background was in education, so this makes sense to me. I've seen this take place. If you don't hold kids accountable, if you just pass kids along, these findings resonate deeply. For example, you find out that for more than a decade, you document, for example, grade inflation effects, particularly in higher education, where A's now dominate nearly 50% of the grades nationwide, up from 15% in the 1960s. And we know that in the 1960s, for example, the United States had the best public schools in the world. By the way, California at that time had the best public schools in the country. California is now second to worst in the country as far as their standardized testing scores. But I want to reiterate something to you. This took place, again, a long time ago. This types of leniency, I guess we'll push it. But the leniency now at that time, for example, was a little bit different. I was listening to Dr. Thomas Sowell recently, and he did a whole interview with Peter Robinson at Uncommon Knowledge at the Hoover Institute. And what he said resonated to me in this article, because there's different ways of leniency. And again, it costs people oftentimes a great deal. While he was at Cornell in the 1960s, Dr. Sowell studied the university policy that was made to bring a decision to bring in more black students at the time. Now, they did this without having to meet the same standards as the other students. So this is when affirmative action was basically kind of setting in for the college admission systems, and quotas, if you will, were being implemented. What took effect was that the students were then put on academic probation, not meeting the Cornell's standards at the time in terms of work output, what the amount of work they can put out, the grade that they were to receive, if you will. And Dr. Sowell, who's, again, another brilliant mind out there, what he did was he went and he discovered in the admissions office, he looked up these students that they were admitting on affirmative action. And the students scored in the top 75th percentile nationwide on their SAT scores, which, again, is really, really good. However, if you look at the overall scores for the average students in the liberal arts degree program in Cornell University at that time, they were in the 99th percentile for all SAT scores in the country. Again, the top 1%. I know we love to hate on the top 1%, but that's who was at Cornell at the time. So when you bring a group of students in who are very bright, very gifted, and you tell them, okay, you've got to keep up now with the students that are performing in the top 1% of the country, it's going to be much more difficult for them to keep up with that. Same thing goes with these grades inflation now. Now you're doing this in public schools, for example. You're giving kids grades they don't deserve. They're going to universities they really can't keep up with. And as a result of that, just like the students in this discussion that Dr. Soul was in, a lot of these students ended up dropping out, where they could have been much more successful if they just went to another university where they could have kept up with the rigor of the academics, and they could have been successful otherwise. What does that lead to? It leads to bitterness. It leads to, well, the teachers are racist. That's what they're being told. And you're seeing this in a lot of these kids today. A lot of them are being told, well, your teacher just doesn't give you the grade because they don't like you. And if you don't change the grade, well, you're going to get in trouble. Well, that's the way things work out, and that's why this article is so important. Kids need to earn the grade, not just be given the grade. That's my take on it, folks. Folks, that'll do it for today's show. Thank you again for being here on this broadcast. Hope you'll share the show with others. Hope you learned a lot from the show as well. Make sure you keep up with your storage of food, folks, your water, ammo, money, gold, medicine, anything you need to be self-sufficient. Make sure you stock up while you can, folks. Have a great rest of the day. I'll see you back here tomorrow for more groundbreaking news on the next Marco Duray Show. Until then, be good, stay busy, and God bless.